Welcome to another interview from Peak Sound Radio. I'm Chris. I'm pleased to be joined today by Casey Murray of Casey Murray and Molly Tucker, one of two duos, including Eloise and Company, coming out to Peak Sound on October 27th for the Peak Island House Concert Series, Long Winter's Night. Eloise and Co. features the combined creative force of two of the country's most sought-after traditional musicians, fiddler Becky Tracy and accordionist Rachel Bell. They crank out concert and dance music with lots of energy. And they're joined by Casey Murray and Molly Tucker, a Boston-based duo playing original and traditional tunes in Celtic, New England, and old-time styles. They all share a passion for contra dance music, and they joined forces to release an album called After the Sky Weeps in 2022. Casey talks to me today about the upcoming show, the Long Winter's Night concert series at the new Brackett Church. Tell us a little bit about your show. You're coming out to the island on Friday, and I'd love to hear a little bit about what brings the four of you out to Peaks.
Yeah, I've been out to Peaks a couple other times, once to play a show at the church with my band Corner House previously, and we had an absolute blast, and I've been wanting to bring this particular musical project out to Peaks Island for some time. So I'll be coming out with Molly Tucker is a great fiddle player, and the other band we're collaborating with is Eloise and Company, which is Rachel Bell and Becky Tracy. And super stoked to finally bring all these folks out to the island.
That's wonderful. Tell me a little bit about the style of music that folks can expect to hear if they come out to the show.
Yeah, predominantly the thing that runs through both bands actually is a lot of contra dance music. Molly and I play for a lot of dancing, and so does Eloise and Company, and that's something we both enjoy a lot, playing for dancers and kind of the energy that traditional music brings to the floor and to feet. But we also both really enjoy playing a lot of Celtic styles. Molly and I particularly play a lot of Irish and Celtic music, as well as some old time. Eloise and Company plays a lot of in the ball folk French tradition too, so it's kind of a cool melting pot between the four of us of lots of different styles.
What I find interesting is that melting pot of sounds is something that I've seen as a theme in some of Ellen's shows. And I'm wondering, how did the four of you connect and decide, hey, it'd be really cool if we blended some of our styles and performed together?
Yeah. I've known Rachel for a long time and have always enjoyed making music with her. And this collaboration started a little over a year ago when Molly and I released our first album last year. And we were looking for a way to kind of bring the in-person show record to life. And we're looking for an instrumentation that felt like was really wonderful to collaborate with. And between Becky's fiddle playing and Rachel's accordion playing, it felt like a really neat pairing with more fiddle and guitar and cello and banjo. So it feels like it has like such a broad sonic spectrum that's quite intriguing.
Yeah, that does sound really intriguing. And you had mentioned contra dancing as being one of the main forms of music that the four of you connect over and that you're going to bring out to the island. For folks that don't know much about contra dancing, do you know anything about where it originated and what the feel is that folks can expect?
Yeah, I often think about it as it kind of gets some roots from square dancing. It's kind of taking square dancing and squishing it into a line where you're traveling with your partner up and down and you're kind of having these interactions together, but also meeting other couples down the line of dancers. So it's a social dance that I really enjoy just because I get to have this experience with everyone on the dance floor, not just the person I'm dancing with as a partner.
From my understanding, I think it's seeing a little bit of a resurgence in Maine. Is that right? Are there different contra dance festivals or locations around Maine?
Yeah, totally. There's, I believe they've maybe started back up with, I think there's at least one or two different dances in Portland and Belfast and all sorts of places around Maine.
As part of your duo, or perhaps as part of, the group of four of you, are you going to those contra dances? Are you sort of participating in that resurgence, or is this a new step towards that direction for you?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting, feels like a bit of both, since the four of us separately played for dancing before the pandemic, and then social dancing is kind of an easy way to spread. So they kind of took a big break, and coming back to it kind of feels like there's almost new life in it, and it's been really exciting to see dances come back to life. There have been some unfortunate small community dances that didn't survive the pandemic, but the ones that are coming back, there's feels like a new life in them, which is exciting to be a part of.
Yeah, that is really exciting. And that is, I think, definitely something that there's some turnover, right? Because like you said, some small venues have been shutting down, but there's also been a lot of energy around making sure that we do interact as a community again, and that we do those really, social things or those community-oriented things in a more intentional way, which is nice. Tell me a little bit about your background in music, the instruments that you play, and what got you started.
Yeah, I started playing music at quite a young age. At the age of 3, my dad signed me up for Suzuki violin lessons, where you start out with your little Cracker Jacks box, learning how to take care of it, and then eventually graduate to holding a little tiny piece of plywood. And that kind of got the ball rolling, taking private lessons, getting into group classes with other kids my age. And the music school I grew up going to had a track of learning to play fiddle tunes and improvising alongside of just your regular classical Suzuki program. So I had a pretty neat opportunity to learn in the folk tradition from a young age. And later on, I started playing the cello and heard some friends playing it at camps and was really intrigued with the sound and wanted to figure out how I could take my own spin on playing folk music on the cello. So that was kind of the progression throughout high school, and started playing a little bit of guitar, and ended up going to college at Berklee College of Music to study cello and playing folk music. And during my time there, I took some banjo lessons with Bruce Molsky, and that was kind of how I got my banjo start. And it's kind of all been evolving from really just those early years of learning to play songs and tunes by ear, and just haven't stopped.
So tell me a little bit about the Suzuki Method. It's definitely something I've heard of before, but I wonder if you could explain how it's different than, kids in like 3rd or 4th grade getting an instrument and taking a class once or twice a week together in school.
Yeah. I had a really great experience with it. The unique thing about it is that at the beginning, you're learning your instrument alongside with your parent. So I got to learn how to play the violin with my dad, and have a practice buddy and someone to do it with, which was really, really special. And another pretty key point about the Suzuki Method is it uses this concept called the mother tongue method, of that we learn to speak before we learn to read. So we learn to play our instruments before we learn how to read our instruments. And I think that's something that sets it pretty far apart from what happens in schools, where usually they give kids an instrument and a book that tells you how to read the notes, and they kind of just work through the book. So it's kind of developing the ear to listen and learn and recognize things, rather than being able to reproduce what's seen on a page.
That's fascinating. I'd say there are parents on the island that are listening. If they thought, gee, it's a great way to teach kids how to play an instrument, I'd love to do that. Is there a group or a society that you would reach out to for the Suzuki Method? Do you know how folks will get involved with that?
Yeah, totally. There's the website. I think it's probably if folks Google, like, the Suzuki Association of America has a whole database of teachers who are certified to teach the Suzuki Method. So kind of you just type in your zip code or something, or your city, and it can give you a whole list of teachers in your area that teach the Suzuki Method for any particular instrument you're looking for, and give you a way to get in touch with them if they're accepting students.
So the other thing that you mentioned is that you had started off with violin, and then you went through a series of different string instruments as well. You had mentioned cello, you had mentioned banjo, and I'm wondering, do you think that part of the reason why you expanded to multiple instruments is because of the method of learning? And do you think it made it easier to transfer skills from one instrument to another?
I think so, yeah. I think a lot of string instruments have a lot of, there's a lot of overlap a little bit in particularly bowed instruments. All the strings are tuned in fifths, so you kind of just have to deal with the transposing kind of thing. And fretted instruments, also it's mostly just figuring out the tuning bit of it. And if you're listening enough to be able to recognize what notes are and you can find them on the instrument, it's really just the idea of listening and recreating. Sometimes I feel like if I'm learning something different, someone's playing something in a different tuning, or it's an old recording, so the record speed is slow, so it sounds like it's in a different key or things like that. It's just really helpful to have that particular amount of ear training just to be able to reproduce it on any instrument.
I wonder if there's a connection too, and stop me when I sort of go too far with the connections here, but I wonder if there's a connection too between being able to pick up things by ear and being able to use that training and your passion for folk music, because from what I understand, folk is very much a oral or like interpersonal musical tradition that's passed down through things like, just playing together or improvising together. Is that true?
Absolutely, yeah. I feel like a lot of the traditions tradition can be an interesting word to use, but the kinds of music that we play is often passed on in an oral fashion of knowing who learned it from who and kind of the lineage of a tune and where it was passed down from and came from originally is something that is super cool to be a part of.
And the other interesting sort of lineage is the number of folks who make their way out to Peaks Island, who know Ellen and Ed, who participate in their concert series, who have a connection to Berklee College of Music. And I wonder, is there a community in Portland or in southern Maine of folks who have that, shared background? And do you get together and interact?
Yeah, sometimes. It's been a while since I've spent a ton of time in Portland recently, but a teacher I had in college, Joe Walsh, lives in Portland, and often see him around when we're playing. My band Cornerhouse often plays at Maine Craft Distilling, and there's definitely a bunch of folks that kind of at the beginning of the pandemic from Berklee made a mass exodus to the Portland area, but I think have since scattered. But it's definitely, I really enjoy the time I get to spend in Portland and on Peaks, connecting with the Berklee community that has moved north.
I guess I have a couple more questions, and then I'll just sort of open it up for anything that you want folks on the island to know in advance of the concert on Friday. When you have a background that is rooted in folk and rooted in a type of music that I guess is older, how do you sort of keep it alive today, right? Because I think one of the things that's interesting about music is that it changes, but it also has its own tradition. So what do you feel like your role is in keeping like the folk traditions alive?
Yeah, it's interesting kind of being a cellist in this sphere. There is some history, but there isn't a ton of it. So it feels like an interesting kind of place to be of learning tunes in a particular tradition and wanting to pass those on to my students or pass them on through concert and things like that. But it's kind of an interesting spot of twisting a little bit and bringing it to the cello, where there isn't a ton of tradition to build it off of, going from cello to cello to cello. It's kind of, I pick things up from banjo players or guitar players or fiddle players and kind of give it a life on the cello. So it feels like a double-edged sword in some ways of wanting to respect the tradition and where it came from, but also knowing that it will change a little bit just by the nature of changing the instrumentation.
Yeah, that's true. And I feel like in some ways that also may keep the tradition fresh too, right? And be something that can put your personal spin on this form of music as you do pass it off to, another generation or students and things like that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then you mentioned students, so I wonder, are you playing an active role in passing on the tradition through things like teaching? Are you teaching, private lessons or at a school or?
Yeah, I teach privately at a community music school just outside of Boston right now, and feels quite rewarding to have. Feels like a very niche set of knowledge that some people seem to be interested in and wanting to keep it alive, and having students who are also enthusiastic about learning fiddle tunes and going to jams and wanting to be a part of the folk scene community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really my follow-up is, how are you feeling about the appetite for this kind of music? Do you feel like there is a passion amongst people who are new to playing instruments to play folk music, to play bluegrass, to play Celtic music, to play contra dance music?
Yeah, I feel like there definitely is an excitement. It almost feels like a bug that bites you, and it kind of like once you get bit, you kind of can't get enough of it. You want to go to more camps, you want to go to more shows, and want to go to more jams, and it's exciting to see some students get bit and be excited to be part of it all, and learning new things, and eventually have the reins to keep passing it on.
So do you have any other pieces of information that you want to share with folks on the island about the upcoming concert?
Yeah. The four of us are super excited to collaborate again. Last year for our album release, we did a kind of equal split duo show where Eloise and Company opened the show, and we finished off with playing the record, and then we got to collaborate as a quartet for a bunch of things. And it's really cool to see kind of everyone gets a taste of what each duo sounds like, and then eventually get to hear what the full soup sounds like of the four of us together. And I'm excited to bring that sound to Peaks.
That's great. And where can people find more information about you? And if they really like your music, where can they help support you as well? Buying an album or supporting you in other ways?
Yeah. To find our music online, Casey Murray and Molly Tucker is on all streaming, and we're on Bandcamp. To find out where those things are and when we'll be playing other places, caseyandmolly.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure talking to you.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Right. We'll look forward to seeing you out here on Friday.
Likewise.
Thanks for listening in on this Island Conversation. If you want to hear more stories like this, please check out peaksislandradio.com, where we have all of our interviews and stories archived. You can also follow us on Instagram and in your favorite podcast app.